Princess Yavari stood at the window of her private chamber and watched the stars. She was tired of this day already, and it had barely begun. Her father, Emperor Korth, had made a decision without asking her. He had hired a human to be her personal bodyguard. A human. The thought made her want to laugh. The Thetians were one of the oldest species in the known galaxy. They had built empires when humans were still living in caves and hitting rocks together. Thayans were tall, graceful, and gifted with psychic abilities that let them sense danger. Before it arrived, their skin was pale blue and their eyes glowed softly in the dark. They were beautiful and powerful. Humans were none of these things. Ivory had read about them. Of course, everyone in the galaxy had heard of the newcomers from a small blue planet called Earth. They had only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. They were short, fragile, and had no natural weapons, no claws, no vom, no psychic powers. They could not even see in the dark, and yet her father had hired one to protect her. It is a diplomatic gesture, her father had explained. The Terran Alliance wishes to prove themselves useful to the greater galactic community. Accepting one of their soldiers as your guard will strengthen our relationship with them. I do not need a primitive alien following me around. Ivari had replied. You will accept this, daughter. It is not a request, so she had accepted it. She had no choice. Now she waited for this human to arrive. She had been told his name was Jake Collins. He had served in something called the United States Marine Corps. She did not know what that meant, and she did not care. He was probably some loud, clumsy creature who would embarrass her in front of the entire diplomatic corps. The door to her chamber slid open, and her attendant stepped inside. Your Highness, the attendant said, bowing low. The human has arrived. Ivari turned from the window. Send him in. The attendant stepped aside, and the human walked into the room. Yavari studied him carefully. He was shorter than her by half a head. His skin was a warm brown color, and his dark hair was cut very short. He wore simple black armor that looked cheap compared to the craftsmanship. His face was calm and still, showing no emotion at all. He stopped a respectful distance from her and stood straight, with his hands behind his back. Your Highness, he said. His voice was quiet and steady. My name is Jay Collins. I have been assigned as your personal protection detail. Yavari tilted her head slightly. You are smaller than I expected. Yes, ma'am. You have no weapons that I can see. I have a sidearm and a knife, ma'am. Both are concealed. And what makes you qualified to protect the princess? Your species has been traveling the stars for less than a single Thetian lifetime. What can you possibly offer that my own guards cannot? Jake Collins did not react to her cold tone. His expression remained perfectly calm. Humans are persistent, ma'am, he said. When we are given a job, we do not stop until it is finished. We do not quit. Ivari almost smiled. Persistence, that is your great strength. Yes, ma'am, I have Tashan guards who have trained for 300 years. They can sense danger with their minds. Before it arrives, they can move faster than your eyes can follow, and you believe that persistence will be enough. I believe it will, ma'am. Ivari shook her head slowly. This creature was either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both, but she had her orders and she would follow them. Very well, human. I am traveling to Cos Prime for a diplomatic meeting. It is a neutral station, and the journey should be uneventful. You will accompany me. Try not to embarrass yourself or my family. Understood, ma'am. Why turn back to the window, dismissing him with her silence. She heard him leave the room, his footsteps soft and careful. She did not think about him again for the rest of the day. What Ivari did not know was that Jake Collins had not slept the night before. He had spent 12 hours reading every intelligence report available on the royal family. He had memorized the layout of Cow's Prime Station. He had studied the species most likely to pose a threat to the princess. What Ivari did not know was that 3 separate assassin guilds had placed bounties on her head: the Vrexian Silent Claw, the Kavathi Shadow Network, the Malachi War Sons. All of them wanted her dead for political reasons. She did not fully understand. What Ivari did not know was that Jake had already identified 17 possible attack vectors. For the journey to Kalos Prime, he had planned responses for each one. He had requested additional intelligence from Terran Alliance Command and received files that even the Tashan Royal Guard did not have access to. The princess thought he was a simple soldier, diplomatic token, a primitive alien, playing at a job too big for him. She was wrong. Jake Collins had fought in 3 wars before his 30th birthday. He had survived ambush, explosions, and close combat against enemies who should have killed him. He had watched friends die and kept fighting. He'd been shot twice and stabbed once, and each time he had gotten back up. Humans were not strong. Humans were not fast. Humans were not gifted with psychic powers or natural weapons, but humans had something else, something that had allowed them to become the dominant species on their world, something that had let them spread across the stars in just 50 years. Humans never stopped. When a human decided to protect something, they would fight until their bodies broke. They would endure pain that would kill other species. They would sacrifice everything they had for a cause they believed in. Jake Collins had been given a job: protect the princess. That was all that mattered. Now, as he walked to his quarters on the ship, he checked his weapons one more time. He reviewed the crew manifest. In his head, he noted the locations of every exit and every potential hiding spot. The princess thought the journey would be uneventful. Jake knew better. He would be ready when the trouble came. And it would come. It always did. He did not sleep that night either. Instead, he sat in the dark with his eyes open, listening to the sounds of the ship around him, waiting. The princess had asked him to guard her. She did not know what that truly meant, but she would learn. The journey to Kalos Prime took 3 days. During that time, Ivari barely noticed her human bodyguard. He was always there, standing quietly in the corner or walking a few steps behind her. He never spoke unless spoken to. He never complained. He was like a shadow that she could almost forget existed. She decided this was acceptable. At least he was not embarrassing her. Kalos Prime was a massive space station built in neutral territory. It floated between the borders of 5 different empires, and it served as a meeting place for diplomats, merchants, and travelers from across the galaxy. The station was old and crowded, filled with species of every kind. Ivari had visited many times before. She knew the station well. She had her own private quarters in the diplomatic wing, and she had meetings scheduled with representatives from several allied Worlds, on the first day everything went smoothly. She attended her meetings, she smiled and spoke the proper words. She represented her father and her empire with grace and dignity. Jake Collins stood by the door during every meeting. He watched, he listened. He said nothing. That night Yavari returned to her quarters and prepared for sleep. Harashan guards took their positions outside her door. Jake took a position inside in a small room connected to her main chamber. You do not need to stay so close, she told him. My guards are more than capable. Yes, ma'am, he said, but he did not move. Ivari did not argue. She was too tired. She went to bed and fell asleep quickly. She woke to the sound of violence. It was not loud. There was no screaming, no explosions, just a series of quick, hard sounds. Impact, a grunt, something cracking. Then silence. Yavari sat up in bed, her heart racing, her psychic senses reached out, searching for danger, but she felt nothing. Whatever had happened was already over. The door to her chamber slid open and Jake Carlin stepped inside. He was breathing hard. His knuckles were bleeding and there was a cut on his forehead, but he was standing, and his eyes were clear and focused. Stay in the room, princess, he said. His voice was calm. I need to check the perimeter. What happened? Ivari demanded. What was that sound? Vexian assassins, 4 of them, they came through the ventilation system. Yevri felt her blood turn cold. Vexians were among the most feared killers in the galaxy. They were insect creatures with hard exoskeletons and blades built into their arms. They could move faster than most species could see. They had killed the royal guards before. Warriors with hundreds of years of training for Vexians, she repeated slowly. And you stopped them? Yes, ma'am. By yourself? Yes, ma'am. Ivari stared at him. This small, fragile human, with his bleeding hands, had defeated 4 Vexian assassins. It seemed impossible. How? She whispered. Jake paused at the door. He seemed to think about his answer for a moment. Humans are persistent predators, ma'am. On our world, we used to hunt animals by chasing them until they collapsed from exhaustion. We are not the fastest. We are not the strongest, but we do not stop. We adapt. We endure. We learn our enemies and wait for the right moment. He looked at her with those strange, steady eyes. I knew they were coming. I heard them in the vents 20 seconds before they attacked. I positioned myself to meet them where the space was tight enough to limit their speed advantage, and I did not stop hitting until they stopped moving. He turned and walked out of the room before she could respond. Ivari sat in her bed for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. Later she would learn more details. The Vexians had bypassed her Thayan guards completely. They had used a chemical agent to dull her psychic senses, which was why she had not felt them coming. They had planned the attack perfectly, but they had not planned for Jake Collins. The security footage showed everything. 4 Vexians dropping from the ceiling, their arm blades extended. Jake meeting them in the narrow hallway. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. Jake fought like nothing Ivari had ever seen. He was not graceful like a Thetan warrior. He was brutal and efficient. He used his elbows, his knees, his forehead. He grabbed one Vexian and slammed it into another. He found the weak points in their exoskeletons and struck them again and again until the kitten cracked. When it was over, 4 elite assassins lay dead on the floor, and Jay Collins was Still standing, the footage spread among her guards. She saw them looking at the human differently now. There was something in their eyes that had not been there before, not quite fear, not quite respect, something in between. Ivari called Jake to her chamber the next morning. "You saved my life," she said. "That is my job, ma'am. I underestimated you. I thought you were." She paused, searching for the right words. "I thought your species was primitive." Jake did not seem offended. "Most species think that, ma'am. We are used to it. Why did you not sleep?" "My attendants told me you have not slept since we left Velocia. I will sleep when the mission is over, ma'am." Yavari studied his face. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and the cut on his forehead had been treated but not healed, but his gaze was still sharp, still focused. "How long can you go without sleep?" she asked. "Longer than most, ma'am. Humans can function for several days without sleep, if necessary. It is not comfortable, but it is possible." "That sounds unhealthy." "It is, ma'am, but sometimes unhealthy is necessary." Yai did not know what to say to that. Her guards worked in shifts. They rested. They took care of themselves. The idea of pushing your body to the point of breaking simply to complete a mission was strange to her. But she was beginning to understand that humans were strange creatures. They did not have the gifts that other species took for granted, so they made up for it in other ways, with stubbornness, with endurance, with a willingness to suffer that bordered on madness. "Get some rest," she told him finally. "That is an order." "With respect, ma'am, I will rest when I know you are safe." The Vrexians were only the first. There will be more. He was right. Yavari knew he was right. The bounty on her head had not disappeared just because one attack had failed. She looked at this human, this small and fragile creature who had killed 4 assassins with his bare hands and refused to sleep because he was afraid more would come. She did not understand him, not yet, but she was beginning to realize that she had been very, very wrong about his species. The days that followed were tense. Yavari continued her diplomatic duties, but she could feel the danger pressing in around her. Harashan guards had doubled their patrols. Station security had been alerted, but everyone knew that if someone wanted her dead badly enough, they would try again. Jake Collins never left her side. He slept in short bursts, never more than an hour at a time. He checked every room before she entered it. He watched every face in every crowd. His eyes never stopped moving. Yavari found herself watching him too. She noticed things she had not seen before: the way he positioned himself between her and any potential threat, the way his hand stayed close to his weapon at all times, the way he seemed to know what people were going to do before they did it. On the 4th day, they attended a formal dinner with representatives from several allied worlds. The food was prepared by the station's finest chefs. The wine was imported from distant planets. Everything was elegant and beautiful. Jake stood by the wall watching the servers as they moved around the room. One server in particular caught his attention. She was a young Kavathi female with pale skin and nervous hands. She carried a tray of small dishes, moving from guest to guest. When she approached Yavari's table, her hands trembled slightly. Her heart rate was elevated. Jake could see the pulse jumping in her throat. Most people would not have noticed these things, but Jake was not most people. Humans had evolved As social creatures, for millions of years they had lived in groups where reading other people was essential for survival. They learned to notice small details, tiny changes in expression and body language that revealed what someone was thinking or feeling. Jake noticed that the server's eyes kept darting toward one specific dish on her tray. He noticed that her breathing changed when she got close to the princess. He noticed that her smile was too wide and her movements were too stiff. She was afraid and she was lying. Jake moved forward. He reached the table just as the server was placing a dish in front of Yevary. Without a word, he switched the plates, taking the dish meant for the princess and placing it in front of an empty chair. "What are you doing?" Yevary asked, confused. "Do not eat that, ma'am," Jake said quietly. He picked up the dish and smelled it carefully. Then he looked at the server. The server's face went pale. She dropped her tray and ran. She did not get far. Station security caught her within minutes. Under questioning, she confessed everything. The dish had been poisoned with a Corvathy neural disruptor, a substance that would have destroyed Yevari's psychic centers and left her brain dead within minutes. Server had been paid a fortune to deliver the poison. She did not know who had hired her. She only knew that they wanted the princess dead. Later, when they were alone, Yevary asked Jake how he had known. Her hands were shaking. He said her heart was beating too fast. She was looking at that dish like it was a bomb. Everything about her body was screaming that something was wrong. You can see all of that just by watching humans' red faces, ma'am. It is what we do. We have been doing it for millions of years. It is how we survived when we were weak and the world was dangerous. Yevary sat down slowly. She had psychic abilities that let her sense emotions and intentions, but she had not sensed the server's fear. The neural disruptor in the food had been designed to block her powers, and it had worked, but it had not blocked Jake's eyes. It had not stopped him from reading the truth in the server's body. "You saved my life." Again she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Stop calling me ma'am. My name is Yevary." Jake hesitated. "That would not be appropriate." "Princess, I do not care about appropriate. You have earned the right to use my name." For the first time, Yevary saw something like emotion flicker across Jake's face. It was small, barely visible, but it was there. "Thank you, Yevary," he said quietly. The third attack came the next day as they were preparing to leave the station. Their transport ship had just cleared the docking bay when a Malik warship decloaked directly in their path. It was huge, bristling with weapons. Before anyone could react, it opened fire. The transport shields failed almost immediately. The engines were hit. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship as it began to spiral out of control. "We are going down," the pilot shouted. "There is an ice moon below us. I will try to crash land, but I cannot promise anything." Jake grabbed Yevary's arm and pulled her toward the escape pods. The ship shook and groaned around them. Smoke filled the corridors. Other crew members were running and screaming. They reached the escape pod bay. There was only one pod left. Jake opened the pod and pushed Yevary inside. He began strapping her into the seat, his movements quick and practiced. "What about you?" Yevary demanded. "The pod only fits one person." "Then we will find another way. We will both stay on the ship." Jake shook his head. "The ship is not going to make it, Yevary, but you will. This pod will get You to the surface, help will come, you will die. Jake looked at her, his face was calm. There was no fear in his eyes, only a quiet certainty that made Yuvari's heart ache. Maybe, he said, but you will live, that is what matters. Why? Yuvari felt tears burning in her eyes. Why would you die? For me, I am not your princess. I am not your family. I am nothing to you. Jake smiled. It was a sad smile full of things she did not understand. You asked me to protect you, he said. Simply, that is enough. He pressed the button to launch the pod. The last thing Yuvari saw was his face through the small window, watching her go. Then she was falling through space alone, and she did not know if she would ever see him again. She did not know that humans had a word for what Jake was doing. They called it sacrifice. She did not know that human history was filled with stories of people who chose to die so that others could live, soldiers who threw themselves on grenades, parents who gave their lives for their children, strangers who ran into burning buildings to save people they had never met. She did not know that for a human, protecting someone was not just a job. It was a promise, and humans kept their promises even when it cost them everything. The escape pod crashed into the ice moon below. Yevri survived. She crawled out of the wreckage and looked up at the sky, searching for any sign of the transport ship. She saw only fire and falling debris, and she wept. The ice moon was a frozen nightmare. The wind screamed across the surface, carrying snow and ice that cut like tiny knives. The temperature was far below what any Thesian could survive for long. The sky was dark and filled with swirling clouds that blocked out the stars. Ivari huddled in the wreckage of her escape pod, trying to stay warm. Her body was shaking badly. Tashans were not built for cold environments. Their thin blood and delicate skin made them vulnerable to extreme temperatures. Without shelter, she would be dead. Within hours, she tried to use her psychic abilities to call for help, but the distance was too great. No one could hear her. No one was coming. She thought about Jake. She wondered if he had suffered when the ship came apart. She hoped it had been quick. She hoped he had not been afraid. She was surprised to find that she was crying again. She had known this human for less than a week, but he had saved her life 3 times. He had given his own life so that she could survive. No one had ever done that for her before. On Theasia, bodyguards were professionals. They did their jobs because they were paid, because it was their duty. If one of them had died protecting her, she would have felt sorry for their families, but she would not have wept like this. She would not have felt this strange hollow pain in her chest. Jake Collins had been different. He had not protected her because it was his job. He had protected her because he had chosen to, because she had asked him, because that was enough for him. She did not understand it, but she felt it, and it hurt. Thought. The hours passed. The cold grew worse. Yavari felt herself getting weaker. Her thoughts became slow and confused. She knew she was dying, but she could not find the strength to care anymore. Then she heard something, footsteps crunching through the ice and snow. She thought she was dreaming. She thought her dying mind was playing tricks on her, but the sound grew louder, closer, and then a figure emerged from the blizzard. It was Jake. He looked like a ghost. His armor was cracked and burned. Frost covered every inch of him. Blood had frozen on a deep wound across his chest. His face was pale and his lips were Blue, but he was walking. He was alive. Told you, he said, his voice rough and weak. We do not quit. Yavari stared at him. She could not believe what she was seeing, how the ship was destroyed. You should be dead. I jumped before it hit the ground, landed hard, walked here. Walked in this storm. How far? About 3 miles, maybe more. I stopped counting. 3 miles in a blizzard that would kill most species in minutes, with wounds that should have left him unconscious. And Ian would have been dead before they took 10 steps, but this human had walked 3 miles through frozen hell to find her. Yavari felt fresh tears on her face. You are insane. Probably, Jake agreed. He knelt beside her and began checking her injuries. His hands were shaking from the cold, but his movements were still careful and precise. We need to find shelter. Can you walk? I think so. Good. I saw a cave about half a mile from here. We can make a fire there. Stay warm until help comes. He helped her to her feet. She leaned against him, and together they walked into the storm. The cave was small but protected from the wind. Jake gathered materials from the crash pod and from his own equipment. Within minutes he had built a small fire. The flames were weak, but they provided enough heat to keep them alive. Yavari watched him work. He moved slowly, clearly in pain. The wound on his chest was bad. She could see bone beneath the torn flesh, but he did not complain. He did not stop. Let me look at that wound, she said. I am fine. You are not fine. You are bleeding badly. Let me help. Jake hesitated, then he nodded and sat down beside her. Yavari cleaned the wound as best she could with supplies from the emergency kit. It was ugly and deep, but somehow it had missed anything vital. Jake sat perfectly still while she worked, not making a sound. You should be screaming, she said. This must hurt terribly. I have had worse. How can you bear it? How can you just ignore pain like this? Jake was quiet for a moment. Humans are good at suffering, he said finally. We do not like it, but we can endure it when we have to, when there is something worth enduring for. Yavari finished bandaging the wound. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside the cave, the fire crackled softly. They sat together in the small circle of warmth, 2 beings from different worlds, alive against all odds. Why? Yavari asked quietly. Why did you come for me? You could have died. You almost did die. Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know? Jake looked at her. The firelight made his eyes look gold instead of brown. Because you asked me to protect you, he said. And because I chose to. When a human makes that choice, it does not matter how hard things get. It does not matter how much it hurts. We do not stop, even if it kills you. Even then, Yavari shook her head slowly. Your species is strange, Jake Collins. I know. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire kept them warm. Anthea, Yavari said slowly. When someone saves your life 3 times, there is a custom. You owe them a debt that can never be repaid. They become part of your family. That sounds like a lot of responsibility. It is, but it is also an honor. She looked at him. You have saved my life 3 times, Jake. By Thetan custom. You are now part of my family. You are bound to me and I'm bound to you. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled just a little. Then I guess I better not die out here, he said. Would not want to disappoint my new family. Yavari laughed. It was a small sound. Weak and tired, but it was real. No, she Agreed, you had better not. They slept close to the fire that night, sharing warmth to survive the cold. Yavari listened to Jake's breathing, steady and strong despite his wounds. She still did not fully understand him, but she knew one thing for certain: she trusted him completely and without doubt, and that was something she had never felt before. 3 days passed on the ice moon. Jake and Ivari survived by staying in the cave, keeping the fire burning and eating emergency rations from the crashed pod. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Yai told Jake about growing up in the royal palace, about the pressures of being a princess, about her dreams of exploring the galaxy. Jake told her about Earth, about his family, about the wars he had fought and the friends he had lost. They were not princes and bodyguard anymore. They were two people who had survived impossible things together. They were family now. On the 3rd day, Jake heard something that made him stop talking. His head turned toward the cave entrance and his body went tense. What is it, Yivari asked. Ships, Jake said quietly. Coming in fast. For a moment, Yevri felt hope rise in her chest. Maybe it was rescue. Maybe her father had sent someone to find her, but Jake's face told her otherwise. It is not rescue, he said. The engines sound wrong, too heavy, military grade. He moved to the cave entrance and looked up at the sky. 2 breaks in the clouds. Ivari could see dark shakes descending, drop ships. At least 4 of them. Malachi, Jake said. They tracked us. They're coming to finish the job. He felt fear grip her heart. The Malachi were a warrior species bred for combat. Their soldiers were among the most dangerous in the galaxy, and there were multiple drop ships, which meant dozens of soldiers. We cannot fight them, she said. We should run, hide somewhere. There is nowhere to hide, Jake said calmly. They have scanners. They will find us wherever we go. He turned to look at her. I have a different plan. What plan? You stay hidden in the cave. I will go out and meet them. You've already stared at him. You cannot be serious. There must be 20 soldiers out there, maybe more. You are one man. You are wounded. You cannot possibly fight them all. Jake checked his weapon. His hands were steady. I do not need to win. I just need to buy time. Keep them busy until real rescue arrives. That is suicide. Maybe. He looked at her with those calm, steady eyes. But it is also your only chance. If I can slow them down, hurt them enough, they will hesitate. They will be careful, and every minute I give you is another minute for help to arrive. Jake, please. Ivari grabbed his arm. Do not do this. I cannot lose you. Not now, not after everything. Jake put his hand over hers. His touch was warm despite the cold. I made a promise, he said quietly. I said I would protect you. This is what protecting means. Sometimes it means standing between the people you care about and the things that want to hurt them, even if it costs everything. He pulled his hand away gently and walked toward the cave entrance. Stay hidden, he said over his shoulder, no matter what you hear. Promise me. Yuri wanted to argue. She wanted to scream, but she saw the look in his eyes, and she knew nothing she said would change his mind. I promise, she whispered. Jake nodded once. Then he stepped out into the snow and disappeared. What followed would later become known as the Battle of Sarah 4. Security footage recovered from Malachi helmet cameras would spread across the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who could not believe what they were Seeing the footage showed a single human walking out to meet 20 Malachi. Elite soldiers. He was wounded. He was outnumbered by every logical measure. He should have been dead within seconds. He was not. Jake used the terrain against him. He moved through the ice and snow like a ghost, appearing and disappearing, striking from angles they did not expect. He used their own weapons against them when his ammunition ran out. He fought with his knife when his gun was empty. He fought with his bare hands when his knife was lost. The Malachi were faster than him. They were stronger than him. They had better armor and better weapons, but they had never faced anything like Jake Collins. He took wounds that should have killed him. A blade through his shoulder, burns across his back, a shot that grazed his head and left blood pouring into his eyes, but he did not fall. He did not stop. He kept fighting with a ferocity that seemed impossible. The battle lasted 23 minutes. When it was over, all 20 Malachi soldiers were dead, and Jake Collins was still standing barely. The Lashin rescue ships arrived minutes later. They found Yavari running through the snow toward a figure lying motionless among the bodies of her enemies. Jake had finally collapsed. His body had given everything it had. The medics worked on him for hours. They had never treated a human before. They did not know how much damage a human body could take and still survive, but they learned that day. They learned that humans were much harder to kill than anyone had ever imagined. Jake lived. He spent weeks in a medical facility, recovering from wounds that would have killed most species 3 times over. Yavari stayed by his side every day. She held his hand when he was unconscious. She talked to him when he could not respond. She told him stories about her world and her people, about her hopes and her fears. When he finally woke, she was there. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved me again." Jake's voice was weak, barely a whisper. "That is my job." "No," Yai shook her head, tears running down her face. "It is much more than that, and you know it." Footage from Sarah 4 changed everything. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers began to reconsider. The assassin guilds that had targeted Yori quietly withdrew their bounties. No one wanted to be the next to test what a human was capable of. The galaxy had learned a lesson that day. Humans were not strong. They were not fast. They had no claws or venom or psychic powers, but they had something else, something that made them more dangerous than anyone had realized. They had the ability to choose what mattered to them, and when they made that choice, they would fight for it with everything they had. They would endure pain that would break other species. They would sacrifice everything, even their own lives, for the people they chose to protect. Yavari sat beside Jake's bed and held his hand. She thought about the question she had asked him so many days ago on her home world. "Can you guard me, human?" She had not known what she was asking. She had not understood what it meant to have a human's protection. Now she knew. And she understood why the galaxy would learn to respect the small, stubborn, impossible species from the little blue world called Earth. When a human chose to protect something, the universe itself had better stand aside.